I thank very much this opportunity to come and talk to this timely called conference. As you will know by my English, I have not been in America. I have been in America only 7 years. It will be in September. When I decided to talk this issue about national reconciliation and academic exchange, I remember something that happened to me that put my mind in terms of Cuban national reconciliation that relate a lot to my experience in America. I was like 8 months in New York after September 11 when I arrived. I arrived in September 2001. And I got an invitation. I was living across the street from Grant's tomb. Obviously, New Yorkers made this joke, who's buried in Grant's tomb is obviously President Grant. And there I met some people from something called the Civil War Round Table. And they were organizing a trip to the battlefield of Gettysburg. And it was a very interesting experience because in Cuba I have never had something like that. But in the road to Gettysburg, we stopped at a place and suddenly everybody in the bus except me, they changed their clothes and they dressed like reenactors. And I said, well, I am a kind of psychiatric boss or something like that. But then we get to Gettysburg and I was with them and suddenly I asked them, what is this building there? And there was a museum in the middle of the battlefield. And as a Cuban that knows that Americans don't value things in the way we value, I say, well, I would like to go there. And it was a very interesting building because it has pictures of the celebration of the 10 years of the Gettysburg battle. And you see there people that fought with the Confederacy and people that fought with the Union, and they were talking to each other, the pictures, these people sometimes them with wounded. And that for me was quite impressive because from Cuban eyes, I say, after so many years of conflict, we have not been able to do something like that. And anybody who knows the history of the United States knows that the Civil War was a serious issue. And I say very enthusiastically, look how great the Americans are, 10 years and they were celebrating. But then I went to work 2 years after for the Carter Center in Georgia. And I went from the Martin Luther King Center to the Stone Mountain in Georgia, where the Jefferson Davis sculpture is. And I realized that the process of national reconciliation in the United States is still in place. And is still moving. And this is very important for what I would say now about how we define national reconciliation. The first thing is that national reconciliation should not be seen as an event. It's a process. The second thing is that it makes more sense to talk about national reconciliation as a conflict management process rather than a conflict resolution process. We as Cubans have a significant divide. Our narratives are very different if we compare what I learned in Cuba and what I learned here. And we have a difference and conflict that I think cannot be solved in a short term. And in some sense, it makes more sense to talk about how we manage our difference. This is more important. It comes from God. Wherever it is human. And I think it's more important to learn to manage our conflicts and to, as generations, when I see the name of this conference, General Action, I think that as a generation, we need to think about how we left to our kids, our children, a world in which the Cuban conflict is closer, and the divide is closer, and we can talk more, and we have a better way to tolerate and to discuss our issues. The third element that I would say that is not connected with the Battle of Gettysburg directly, but it is indirectly connected, is that the goal needs to be clear. A Cuban political system that is compatible with, compatible is the right word to say in English, I'm saying it correctly, compatible with international human rights. Because this is something that it's I think any party in this world must agree. The idea that there are values and there are rights that everybody has, regardless of his political ideas, his race, his religion, anything. So I think that these three elements are important. It's not an event, it's a process. It has to do more with conflict management than conflict resolution in the Cuban particular case. And the third issue, the final goal, is a Cuba that is compatible with human rights, with international human rights. And if you want, ask me later, that I will tell you why for me it's important to say international human rights and not human rights in abstract. So how can academic exchange promote this goal of national reconciliation? I found very appealing the division of Dr. Damian Fernandez from FIU on three kinds of politics. He called that Cubans have three kinds of politics. He called it the politics of passion, the politics of affection, and the politics of reason. I think that my colleague Ignacio Sosa presents very well the importance of the politics of affection. Passion in politics is not, in my opinion, is not a source of strength. It's a source of weakness in many senses. If we are talking about national reconciliation, well, perhaps we need to have a center that is as passionate as the extremes. But in general, I will suggest that national reconciliation in the Cuban context imply a transition from the politics of passion to the politics of reason. There are three categories that help us to understand national reconciliation and academic exchange. And they are, I would say, three actors and processes can be divided in three categories. They are bridges, when they connect different groups. They are walls, when they divide and they separate the different groups of the Cuban polity, and they are spoilers. Spoilers are those actors that commit to the status quo, try to ruin any attempt to tear down a wall or build a bridge between different groups. Why academic exchange are tools of national reconciliation? I think that there is a great consensus in the Cuban American community that academic exchange can help to reduce the differences between Cubans and between Cuba and the United States. I'm telling you from Carlos Alberto Montaner, I will call it on the liberal side, to Andres Gomez in the Maceos Brigade. In general, there is an idea that we need to, that academic exchange is a good thing for national reconciliation. Cuban Americans, contrary to what sometimes has been said, Cuban Americans has played a leading role in the promotion of academic exchange. Let's remember that Dr. Jorge Dominguez from Harvard and Dr. Carmelo Mesalago from Pittsburgh were the first president of LAFA that invited a Cuban academic delegation to a conference in the United States. So this is not something that we are saying that this is imposed on the community. There has been, like everything in this community, is not monolithic, and there are people that have been, they have had the courage to compromise for quite a long time. I'm talking about American history and Cuban history. Something that also surprised me was that the profiles of courage